This is a second example of using substitution for indefinite integrals. We have the indefinite integral of 3 times the cosine of 3x dx. Remember, what we want to do with this technique is start by looking for the product of a composition and the derivative of the inner function of that composition. So, of course, we want to figure out what is the composition. Well, it looks to me like, well, what do you think? Cosine of 3x looks like a composition. And let me rearrange this integral a little bit so that we can see that we have cosine of 3x, which is a composition, and the inner function, 3x, its derivative is 3 dx. So indeed, we do have the product of a composition of a function and the derivative of the inner function. So now let's look at the fully worked example. In this first part here, I've written it out using the f of g of x notation, and I'm not going to do that for the rest of the examples, but sometimes it's easier for students to think about finding that composition by looking at it as f of g of x. So if we look at it as f of g of x, then we can see that cosine of 3x, so the function f is taking the cosine of something, and the function g is the input, which is 3x. And of course, that inner function g of x is equal to 3x, and its derivative is 3. So everything lines up. And then now let's take a look at the u notation using the u sub. We can see that u is the inner function. U is what we're always going to substitute for the inner function. So u is 3x. The derivative of u, du, is equal to 3 dx. And so f of u would be cosine of x. Now let's go over to our integral and see how we're going to substitute. So the cosine of 3x becomes cosine of u. And remember, our goal here is to put everything in terms of u so that we simplify this expression to a point where we know how to take the antiderivative of it. And then 3 dx is du. So we can now go back to our worked problem over here and see that once we do our substitution, we are taking the indefinite integral of cosine of u du. Remember, we've replaced all the pieces. And now taking the antiderivative of cosine of u is sine of u plus our arbitrary constant. Now substitute for u so that we have everything in terms of x, and we get our final answer, sine of 3x plus c.